So, good morning, everybody, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here in Rome with you. In the spirit of what you can and cannot control, I am a little bit disappointed with the weather, but on the other hand, I'm only here for less than 24 hours, so it's not really going to affect me, but it's such a fantastic place, and I hope you have a wonderful conference for the rest of the time. Now, Tim has just introduced me. I have to, in full disclaimer, I have to say I am not a specialist in cell and gene therapy. If I have any speciality, it's about European regulation. But I am the executive director of the European Medicines Agency, and we are really committed to doing what we can to advance the cause of advanced therapies in Europe and beyond. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of history, a little bit of present time, and a little bit of future. And I call this talk about regulation, revolution, and evolution. And it's about what we've done in the advanced therapy area, what we're doing at the moment, and what we hope to see in the future. So I'm going to present this brief journey, and I'll talk about, a lot of what I'll talk about will not be specific to cell and gene therapy, but hopefully will enable some of the progress there. And of course, I think all of you know that we're actually at a very exciting time in Europe at the moment in that we have a big reform of the pharmaceutical legislation on the statute books. And this enables us to move to a new future state, and we're very excited about what that will bring. So if first of all, start with our vision. So what our vision that we've just renewed in the last few months is a fast path from innovation to safe and effective medicines. And this year we turn 30. On the 26th of January of 2025, the European Medicines Agency had been in existence for 30 years. So it's also an opportunity for us to celebrate, but also to make sure that we're ready for the future. 30 years ago, we were set up to bring together the best expertise in Europe so that at the time we could have that expertise work together on behalf of European patients in the biotech and high-tech area, which was very much an emerging field at the time. And of course, we've come such a long way from there. But the idea that rather than having every country do it on its own, that we would create a European system to do everything once for Europe was the thinking behind this. So we've 30 years experience of ensuring safe, effective, and quality medicines for patients. I would echo Tim's words and Bob's words. Patients are also our North Star, and I'll talk a little bit about how patients are involved in our work. But maybe to talk a little bit more about our current environment, and that's really about how we enable innovation and competitiveness in the current environment, because one of our strategic focus areas is regulatory science, innovation, and competitiveness. And we published our European Medicines Agency network strategy to 2028 at the end of last year, and there is a full focus area devoted to regulatory science and innovation and competitiveness. And this is, I think, some of the areas where you'll see some of the work that we're working on. So if I look back then at the regulations, so where we start, the start of the the regulatory system for cell and gene therapy medicines came about with the regulation on advanced therapies which was adopted in Europe in December 2008. And I think what I see as really an innovation here is that we were the first country or region to have a dedicated regulatory framework for advanced therapy medicinal products. And we set up a dedicated committee, the Committee on Advanced Therapy, which came into force once the ATMP regulation came into being. And this was inspired by the first ideas in 1995 to bring together a pool of European expertise as opposed to national expertise. But here it was to build a dedicated pool of expertise on ATMPs in Europe. And this has been a model for other regulatory authorities to develop their own legal frameworks. And it's also been a source of inspiration for WHO on providing a suitable framework for these products. And coming back to patients, the role of patients and healthcare professionals is essential in this field. And patient and healthcare professionals are full members of our Committee on Advanced Therapies. And that allows them to bring the views not just of the scientists and experts working in this area, but the views of those affected by the condition, telling us what it really means for patients, and also on the healthcare policy perspective. Now, we've had 16 years now of the regulation on advanced therapies, and you'll see that we've had 28 authorizations in the EU. Most of these products are targeting orphan diseases, and of course orphan diseases affect about 26 million people living in the EU. But what's exciting here is that our pipeline figures show that we're expecting over 20 ATMPs in the pipeline between 2025 and 26. So if you look at this slide, you see there's been a lot of energy at the right side of the slide, and we're expecting this to continue. And even if these figures aren't exactly the same as those that Tim had shown, I think the idea that there are some new exciting products coming and we're ready for them is very important. And if I think, again, Tim has talked about the blockbuster models, and here we're looking mainly at the CAR-T cell therapies. But there's also some very exciting advances in very small populations, in ultra-rare diseases, where patients, and particularly children, are given incredible leases of life by advances in cell and gene therapy. And maybe if I just take the example of Strimvelis, all patients treated with Strimvelis were alive 3 years after treatment, and the rate of severe infections declined immediately after treatment and continued to decline with a longer-term follow-up. And this is really a meaningful and important development for the patients and for their families. Now, you will notice that there are some products there in gray, and those products are products that were withdrawn or the marketing authorization was not renewed. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about this in my next slide. So you'll see that first of all, the good news, if I do the optimistic bit, the good news is none of them were withdrawn for safety reasons. It was all for commercial reasons. So I think this is probably one of the biggest challenge that needs to be addressed in terms of embracing cell and gene therapies in healthcare systems. How can we ensure that they're commercially viable? And that's not my job as a medicines regulator, but I think as a collective community, it's part of your job. So the main reason for all the withdrawals non-renewal were commercial. Some of them were closure of manufacturing sites, some of them difficulties in getting reimbursements, some of them simply that the ATMPs were for very small populations which were not only challenging to develop, but then a higher risk of not achieving satisfactory commercial viability. Now, one of the advances that we're seeing here that I see as a great opportunity is the regulation on health technology assessment, because this regulation provides an opportunity for increased dialogue and mutual understanding between regulators and HTA bodies. And as you know, the joint clinical assessment is a step forward in creating this link between the HTA bodies and the regulatory bodies. We see this as very exciting because one of the things we've learned is there are very different cultures in the regulatory environment and in the pricing and reimbursement environment. And different cultures often find it hard to get to know each other and to talk to each other effectively. So part of this is making sure that we do have mutual understanding, but the other part is ensuring that the trials that are being done can serve both regulatory and pricing and reimbursement purposes. And that means that we can, if that works, we can get medicines to patients faster. So there are great opportunities here. There are also challenges, but the idea that we work together better is good news for patients. Now, here, this is not specifically about advanced therapy medicinal products, but this is about how we support innovation. And one of the ways we do is by making sure our door is always open to innovators, to developers, no matter what size or in what sector you are. And we aim to work tirelessly with stakeholders so that we can understand the need, so we can anticipate the future, and we can make sure that we have these collaborations in place. Now, here it's quite a busy slide, and I always say when they give me this to talk about, I say, well, that just looks like a list of different things. What am I meant to say? And I think what I want to say is there are a lot of different opportunities. So if you're in the academia field, we can organize an academia briefing meeting for you. We have an innovation task force where you can come with your ideas, with your regulatory challenges, and we'll have an informal discussion about what that means and what you might need to look out for. We also have a quality innovation group where we're really trying to make sure that we as regulators, as European regulators, are on top of the manufacturing and developments that are happening at the moment, and that we not only can explain how we regulate them, but also that we learn what's there and maybe what needs to be adapted from a regulation perspective. We have an office for small and medium-sized enterprises, and we have a program where we have provided specific support for academia developers of ATMPs. Now, if I just make a little bit of a plug for the EMA Prime scheme, that's the priority medicine scheme. And the reason why I want to highlight this today is because many of the ATMPs in Europe have benefited from scientific advice and or the Prime scheme. In fact, almost half of the Prime designated products are ATMPs, and most of the ATMPs approved since 2018 have had Prime support during development. And for those of you who are working in the US area, it's a little bit like the breakthrough designation. It provides early proactive support to medicines developers so to optimize the generation of robust data and enable accelerated assessment. Now, if I can then move on to the other areas that I think are really exciting as well is the work that will be done on the Biotech Act. And maybe just to highlight that a key delivery of the European Commission strategy, now this is not the EMA, this is the European Commission, but a key deliverable of the strategy is to boost biotechnology is looking at how we can help from startup to scale up. And this recent EU Biotech Hub brings together tools and resources to help to succeed in the biotech and biomanufacturing area. And we, as EMA, contributed to the development of this hub. It's hosted on the Commission's Europe portal, and it serves as an operational tool for easy and accessible information on the relevant EU legislation, but also on financing opportunities and business support networks. And then we have been talking to the Commissioner about the Biotech Act, which is expected to be on the statute books in 2026, and thinking about what would really help in the medicines sector. And then maybe to move a little bit to the clinical trial environment, and I was looking at the figures on the slides and where European sits in the clinical trial space in the ATMP field. And actually this is reflected across all sectors. We really need to do a lot more to boost the EU clinical trial ecosystem. Because we recognized that this was a challenge, we set up the Accelerating Clinical Trials in the EU initiative a couple of years ago. And this is an initiative that brings together the European Medicines Agency, the heads of medicines agencies across Europe, and the European Commission to see what we can do to address some of the challenges that we hear developers have when in setting up clinical trials in Europe. One of the outcomes that is relevant to this sector is the recommendations we've done on decentralized elements in clinical trials. And we've also done quite a lot of work on improving the scientific advice offering, and we have a number of pilots ongoing there. I also want to mention our multi-stakeholder platform. We've established a multi-stakeholder platform, and this allows regular dialogue and cooperation between key stakeholder groups and regulators, including ethics committee, which was one of the areas that was where there isn't a strong responsibility within the regulatory space. But really the concept is how can we work together to improve the clinical trial environment in Europe? And I'm delighted to show you this, one of the deliverables, and this is the clinical trial methods. And this is a tangible example of the impact of the ACT EU. We launched this clinical trial map a couple of weeks ago. It's accessible from the public website of our clinical trials information system. And it's designed to improve patient and healthcare, or to provide patients and healthcare professionals with easy access to comprehensive and real-time information about the clinical trials. So you can look at your disease area, you can look at who's recruiting, you can look at who's doing studies, and if you click on any of the points on this map, you can get in and actually find out who the principal investigator is and get in contact with them. It's had very good feedback so far, but I really would urge you to familiarize yourselves with this map and explore its potential, but also to give us feedback because there will be future versions of this map, and if you could participate in the feedback survey, you'll find that on the trial map page as well. Now let me talk a little bit about how we engage with patients across the ATMP life cycle. And I think I come back to what I said in the beginning. Patients are the true experts, especially patients with rare diseases and ultra-rare diseases. It's patients and their carers who are the true experts in this disease. And we need to make sure that we put patients at the core of what we do. So we do engage with patients across the life cycle of advanced therapy medicinal products. We include them in our activities. I mentioned that they're full members of our Committee on Advanced Therapy, but we also include, they're also in our Orphan Committee, in our Pediatric Committee. We involve them in the labeling information to make sure that what we're saying in the labeling actually makes sense for patients. And we strongly believe that the patient view is essential for our decisions. Just to mention that we're also using data from patient registries in some of the decision making. Also, I'll talk a little bit about our efforts on real-world evidence and also our work on patient experience data. And let me just give you an example of a recent product that was that has been authorized for dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa, which is an ultra-rare genetic blistering disease. And in fact, it was the authorization was based on the clinical data was derived from a single-arm trial, and data from patient registries was used to complement and support the clinical data. So I think these combinations are going to be very, very important going forward. And then maybe if I can talk a little bit about how we're using better data. We're using real-world evidence to help us answer questions about medicines or group of medicines, and to learn more about how they're actually being used in practice. And this is the main work on this is through our Darwin EU network. This is the data analysis and real-world interrogation network. It's our primary source of real-world evidence, but we don't hold this ourselves. We've contracted a coordination center to work with data partners such as hospitals, registries, insurance claims, biobanks, and healthcare records from general practitioners to bring together the data using a common data model. And this allows us to have access to data from more than 180 million patients from 16 countries. And the fact that we're using a common data model means that we can analyze data from several countries or healthcare settings in one study. So this type of work helps us to get more data, to transform data into elements we can use for decision making, and allow us to really make more data-driven decisions on medicines. And I think the next slide gives you an example of some of the, where we see the future. And this is an extract from a recent publication. It's about our vision from clinical evidence for 2030. We strongly believe that clinical evidence needs to reflect patient experience and medical needs, and we want to achieve excellence in this area. And we feel that there's a need for multinational, better designed and more impactful clinical trials, but that we can complement these by data that enables the use of real-world evidence to establish values. So patients guide the patient voice guides us every step of the way. We can use different sorts of evidence to help with the evidence generation, and then allow us to make evidence-based decisions and be transparent about it. Now, a little bit about some of the advances, and this is something that's in our draft legislation at the moment, and it's the use of, or better use of platform technologies. So the idea of platform technologies is not new, but during the pandemic, we did have a lot of experience with trying to change both vaccines and monoclonal antibodies as the virus was evolving. In the current legislation, there is the concept now of introducing a provision for platform technologies. Whether or not this survives to the final legislation, we strongly believe that we can still use any evidence that has been used on a certain platform to inform about future developments in using the same platform. At the moment, we're using this under the prior knowledge concept. But we do envisage that we get to a stage where we'll be able to authorize the technologies and then look at the possibility to adapt based on specific parameters. And maybe here, if I can just mention again the Quality Innovation Group. This is a group made up of inspectors and quality assessors. We've had a dedicated discussion on platform technologies with personalized medicines. And last November, we organized an open dialogue with stakeholders, including the European Commission Joint Research Centre, the EDQM, the FDA, the Japanese PMDA, and Swissmedic on the use of platform technologies using specific case studies. So there is a lot of work going on in this area as well. Now, I said I'd talk a little bit about the future, and I think I've mentioned this quite a bit as I've gone through my slides, but I do see there are many opportunities in the new pharma legislation to help us with enabling innovation, and the idea of sandboxes where we don't have a regulatory experience, but we can play around and see what really matters, and of course the platform technology approach. But the other thing I want to mention here is the opportunities for simplification and digitalization, because the pharma legislation effectively hasn't been changed for the last 20 years, and there are great opportunities to move it to the 21st century. And this will allow us to adapt some of our frameworks. It also means that we can really look at how we can use digitalization and tools such as artificial intelligence better. There are also other elements, including enhanced support for small and medium-sized enterprises and non-profit organizations, which again might benefit this sector. And I think the thinking behind it, certainly from our perspective, is really about how we move the regulatory system and the procedures to take advantage of some of the advances and technologies that are around. And I think this brings me to my final slide, and maybe just to stress that we are really proud to be able to support the development of innovative ATMPs. We feel that our role as regulators is to help to enable the translation of innovative concepts into real-world treatments. And to do this, we want to minimize the barriers while making sure we maintain high standards of quality, safety, and efficacy. I strongly believe we're living at a time of change and an era of opportunity. It's a time where we have the possibility to do things differently. We have the possibility to bring stakeholders together. Stakeholder collaboration and listening to all perspectives is what makes us stronger and what helps us to enable innovation. And these sort of innovations that we're seeing can change the lives of patients, and that's what really matters. So today, I believe we have a unique opportunity to find and use data better, to enable real-time and real-world data based on patient experience, and also to use promising technologies and avail of tailored support. So my message in leaving you here for the formal part of this presentation is, again, our doors are open. We have many fora that you can come and talk to us. Please do, because the earlier you talk to us about possible regulatory challenges, the more success you can expect in the long run. And we have too many developers who didn't come to talk to us and had to redo things that would have actually helped, that were quite easy to solve. But we weren't able to have that conversation. So please, my message, the door is open. Please come and talk to us, formally, informally. We want to learn. We won't have all the answers, but if you don't come to us, we don't even know what the questions are. Thank you very much.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Great job. All right. Okay. That was great. Thank you, Emer, for sharing those terrific thoughts with us. Really appreciate it. So maybe I just want to build on some of the things you touched on regarding patients. You described well, like how in many ways, when you think about it, you guys do an amazing job of putting the patient at the center of a lot of your thinking and work. And maybe just tell us a little bit more. I mean, these, as I touched on, for too many of these patients, the status quo represents death or disability. And these ATMPs can be transformative. But maybe just give us a little bit of your thoughts on when you think about the patients that we serve, like what comes to mind for you?
So I think for me, the true promise of ATMPs is the ability to transform lives. Yeah. And to transform lives at an individual patient level. And that's the tradition of medicine's development has been much more about a population level. So we have to adapt to thinking on a much more personalized level. And many of the products that we're dealing with are targeting orphan diseases or rare or ultra rare. And these do cause challenges, not because the less you know about a disease, the less you can do about it. And you're dealing with very small populations, so you need to enable methods for collaboration because, again, and this is what I see as a huge opportunity, because if you're working in one country, you might have, I was in Ireland last week at a rare disease conference, and sometimes there were 3 patients. So what can you do? You know, this is an area where you need to collaborate and communicate and get the networks together. And I feel the patients have a real role to play in doing this, and I really applaud the way the patients have worked together. But I also think there's an opportunity to tell this story because we've come from a time when there were literally no solutions available. My father suffered from a rare disease. My 2 grandmothers suffered from rare diseases. If they were lucky that they got a diagnosis, they were lucky. It didn't happen. And I reckon that was because we were relatively privileged. And that's one of the reasons it happens. So it doesn't happen for everybody. So how can we make this much more accessible to all patients and in all parts of the world? And some of it is about, I'm just going to tell you a story about a patient advocate that came to talk to us, actually for our 30th anniversary. Name was Case Smits. And he was, I think he was in his 70s, suffering from hemophilia, and had grown up in the Netherlands, had been through all sorts of treatments which actually caused problems, had contracted HIV from contaminated blood samples, was now was now doing very, very well. I mean, never expected to be alive, and wouldn't have been alive without medicine. And now we have 3 gene therapy products for hemophilia. The Roctavian, the hemophilia A, was approved in 2022, also supported by the PRIME scheme. And it has the effect is sustained for at least 2 years. So what does that mean? It means you don't have to have the risk of a transfusion. You don't have to go to the hospital every week. Somebody doesn't have to bring you there. These are life-changing possibilities.
Yeah, transformative. Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. So, you know, with this audience, we have some people that'll be very familiar with the EMA's work regarding ATMPs, and some maybe from other geographies that are a little bit less familiar. What you talked about, you know, I loved your, you know, contact us early, sort of at the end of your slides. But just tell us a little bit more about that, how to best work with the agency, how to best, you know, contact, you said informally and formally. Just give us maybe a little bit more of your thinking on that and how we can collaborate, industry and regulators.
Yeah, so I think I really will repeat a lot of what I said during my presentation. Come early, come often, and especially if you have a complex development plan that you're working on, because if it's complex, I think it's important you get a regulatory perspective. So we have opportunities, we have pipeline meetings, so companies can come to us, companies or developers can come to us with their pipeline, tell us what they're working on. This also helps us with making sure that we have the right expertise available when the product will actually come for marketing authorization. We have the Innovation Task Force, where again, it's an informal mechanism to come and talk to us about specific challenges that you might see. And as I said, we might not have all the answers, but we will certainly have, we'll make sure that we try and find them. And our goal here is to, one, prepare us for what's coming, but also to make sure that the development pathways are robust so that they will deliver products for patients. If you're a small and medium-sized enterprise, we have small and medium-sized enterprise briefing meetings. We have academia briefing meetings. We have the quality innovation group I've mentioned a couple of times. We also have a number of different stakeholder platforms where we talk about research and development, we talk about marketing authorization, we talk about innovation, and that's more for the representatives of associations, but it really keeps you up to date with what's going on. And maybe then just to mention briefly our work with academia. We have the possibility of academia briefing meetings. In the new legislation, we have a responsibility to set up a dedicated academia office. There's also some financial incentives for developers performing academic trials. And we have set up a collaboration a pilot scheme 2 years ago for non-commercial developers where they can benefit from enhanced support from the agency. The first one was the Hospital Clinic of Barcelona on a CAR T cell, but the second round, which we launched in December, we had 11 candidates who came to us. And what we find is that especially in the area, in the smaller developers find it extremely hard to navigate the regulatory complexities, and we feel it's our responsibility to help.
Great, thank you. You know, another thing you touched on was the increasing globalization of cell and gene therapies, and you guys collaborate with the FDA and the MHRA and the PMDA, but maybe give us a little bit more detail on that, and you know, how do you work to align expectations, reduce redundancies, and are there specific areas where you see more progress could be needed?
Well, I strongly believe that international collaboration is core to everything we do, and especially in areas where there are small populations, you really need to think about how we can collaborate better. I started my European regulatory career also working on international harmonization. I was involved at the very early stages of the International Conference on Harmonization, and I think this is, it really means that international collaboration is very, very close to my heart. But in the agency, we have many, many opportunities to engage at an international front. We have set up, we have 20 years of experience now of working under confidentiality arrangements with the US FDA, and we have what we call cluster meetings where we try to get the experts together on in individual areas to see how we can align and converge better. So we have an oncology cluster, we have an ATMP cluster, we have an orphan cluster, we have a pediatric cluster. We actually have 30 clusters all together, so I'm not going to mention them all. Yeah. But what's happened, these started off as bilateral clusters, but now we have had requests from other regulators to join. So for example, the ATMP cluster also includes Health Canada, the Japanese PMDA, and Swissmedic. And the cluster meets every 2 months to discuss scientific and regulatory issues, whether there might be a need for additional guidance. And then if the products are going through the regulators at the same time, we have a possibility to discuss individual products and alignment on these. And then, of course, we have, so that's at the European medicines agency, more or less on the bilateral front, but we also engage with the International Pharmaceutical Regulators program, and there is a joint cell and gene therapy working group there. We also contribute to WHO initiatives. And the other thing I want to briefly mention is the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, and I have the honor and privilege to be chair of this until October this year. And this is a coalition which is made up of the heads of regulatory authorities. So it's not an operational technical group. It's really about looking at what are our strategic priorities, where we need to maybe align, maybe some of the existing international mechanisms aren't working as well as they could. Can we tweak? Yep. Is there an area where we need to focus? Is there something we need to say as a regulatory community? And maybe just to mention one of the initiatives under the ICMRA umbrella, and this was an initiative to set up a workshop on rare diseases, and we did this together with Swissmedic in September 2024, looking at the technological and regulatory challenges encountered in the rare disease area, and some of the ideas that are coming out of that now include a one-stop shop for R&D developers worldwide, and we're looking at how we can continue this dialogue. And maybe just one other area that we're quite excited about, and this is a collaboration on gene therapies for ultra-rare diseases. This is with the US FDA. It's called Cogent. You may have heard of it, but the idea is that agencies from, or experts from both agencies have a close interaction during the assessment of an actual application, so that we can increase the efficiency of the regulatory processes, create opportunities for convergence, learn lessons that we can use for future product development, and again, ultimately help to bring the products to the patients globally.
Yeah, great. We'll leave it at that. Thank you for coming to Rome and visiting with us. Thank you for your leadership across Europe, and thank you for your global leadership in the biotechnology space writ large. So please join me in thanking Emer Cooke.